Jerry Diamond with How to Get Out of Babylon. What is that? Oh, something back there. I got a kind of a summer weight hat. Jersey brought that. Take the do-rag off. I think it'll still be hot, but at least I could, totally waterproof, I could soak it really good. It's got air vents. It fits okay. It's nice. It'd be more of maybe a dress hat. And it has side snaps, which don't really do what I'd like them to do. I like them up like that, but then it's got the, the neck thing. But it'd be good for a lot of things. Keep the sun off anyway if it's not too terribly hot and you're not working too hard and sweating too hard. Alrighty, back to business. Back to brass tacks. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is Christianity and shoe leather. Okay, I'm kind of chilly day. This is the biggest storm I've seen in a long time. Thor News. That's what I heard from him. I guess some people are getting hammered. One of my subscribers said they got a blizzard going up in Lincoln, Omaha, somewhere like that. Somewhere in Nebraska. That furrin country. Okay. Give me a break, people. If not, I'll take one. Now I'm talking about 3 peoples out there. I've had about enough grief. Alright. It's not that big of a deal, but it's kind of tiring. Alright. Where am I sitting? I don't know. It just doesn't feel quite right. Alright, we've blown 2.5 minutes. When Mark got back to his house, he told Jess what Joe had asked him. Jess's reaction was anything but calm. She ranted and raved that there was no way she or the other people in the community were going to stand by and watch while that 2-timing witch took the Roberts boys. Mark finally got her calmed down and told her Joe hadn't even talked to Connie about it, and he hoped when he did, she would discourage him. Jess asked if Mark had come to a decision about them keeping the boys. Mark told her that he'd thought about it, and he agreed that they were in the best position to take the boys in and care for them. He told her he wanted her to consider the first few months as a trial period to see how the boys adjusted. She happily agreed and hugged her husband. It was almost time for dinner, but Mark wanted to check on how the water tank was coming. He headed over to Manny's house. The stand was finished, and Chaparro and David were just finishing up the plumbing. The windmill was pumping, and when Mark stood with the tank between him and the sun, he could see that there was already some water in it. Great job, guys. Mark praised the workmen. Chaparro smiled. David beamed. Thanks, Dad. By the time the meeting is over, there might be enough water that we won't have to run the generator tonight. David turned on the spigot for a second and showed his father how well the setup worked. Chaparro said it will come out faster when the tank is full. That's great. I was really getting worried about what we'd do for water if the generator broke or if we ran out of gas. Are you ready for dinner? Mark asked. I just need to help Chaparro pick up the tools and carry them back to his place. I can do that. You go on home. I'll see you tomorrow after school. Chaparro told his young apprentice, and by the way, I couldn't have finished this without your help. You're listening and learning fast. I'm proud of you. Thank you, sir. The wide grin almost split David's face, and thank you for teaching me. The young man shook the journeyman's hand. Mark couldn't tell who was prouder, him or David. It was a nice thing for Chaparro to brag on the boy in front of his father, and Mark knew he meant every word. If only someone had been studying under George like this. Of course, Mark thought, how stupid of me not to have thought of it before. His thoughts of how to implement his plan were interrupted by his son. Dad, when are we going back out to look for Grandma and Grandpa? Mark took a deep breath. He'd been going over the same question in his mind since they'd found the note from Mike. Unfortunately, he had only been able to come up with one logical answer. We're not, son. There's just no way to know where they might be. The young man was silent for a minute. So it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack? No, it would be like looking for a needle in a field of haystacks. If I could narrow it down to just one haystack, I would have already been gone. But without knowing what route they're taking, there is no way I can ask men to risk their lives for what most likely would be a wild goose chase. Don't you think we could figure out the most likely route they would take? Yes, but one thing this last trip taught me was that things never go as you plan, and one little detour can lead to another and another until you're so far from your original plan that it looks like you never even planned anything at all. I see. So we just have to wait for them. Yes, we wait and trust the Lord to watch over them, Mark said, knowing that was the only chance they had. When do you think they'll get here? Mark had spent a good deal of time thinking about that question, too. Uncle Mike said they would be here in 10 or 12 days. I think he was very optimistic with that estimate. I think it will take 20 or 30 days. Mark didn't say he was thinking that if they didn't make it in 30 days, they probably wouldn't make it at all. At dinner, everyone told about what they had done. It was typical for a family to share the events of the day at dinner, Mark thought. But how different the stories had become since the burst. Mark couldn't help but to see how George reacted to the various accounts of the day. He seemed to soak up every word. He listened so intently to each of the speakers that he barely touched his dinner. Or was it that the cancer had taken his appetite? If that was so, then it was imperative that Mark talk to him as soon as possible about an apprentice. Hey, George, I have to drop Craig off in Gonzales tomorrow morning. You want to ride shotgun? The guys at Promise Point want you to look at their gardens anyway. We could stop there on the way home. Sounds good, the old farmer answered. You need at least 3 or 4 days for that, 3 or 4 guys for that trip, Gunny remarked. Rats, Mark thought. He really needed George alone to be able to talk with him seriously. Plus, he would like to stop at the hospital with George and get Dr. Ken to give him a once-over. Mark hoped to talk to Gunny out of insisting on more than George and him for the trip. Oh, Gunny, stop being such a mother hen. It's just a milk run over there and back. We just came home that way on Sunday, and there wasn't even a hint of a problem. George and I can handle it. Maybe you're right, but you need to take at least one more just to make your mother hen feel better, okay? Mark knew that if he argued any more, or didn't do as Gunny said, it would raise eyebrows. He'd have to find someone George would trust to be in on his secret. When the news came on, it was the same old, same old. The only interesting items were that the president's speech tomorrow was going to be very important, and he'd asked that all Americans listen. At the meeting, Mark filled the community in on the meeting at the sheriff's office and how it wouldn't mean much of a change for them. Since they were already doing what everyone else was going to do, it only meant that they might have to change their training schedule some. Mark had Gunny tell the group about the scout squads he was going to start training. Everyone saw the wisdom in being proactive. Any who would have been doubtful were on board since the attack Friday night. Gunny said that he'd start training Jim's crew in the morning, and the other 2 would start on Wednesday and Thursday. Chaparro got up and told everyone about the windmill and water tank and about his plan to run a line down the center of the subdivision so that no one would have to carry water further than a block. This got an ovation from the crowd that lasted several minutes. The last item of business was to inform everyone about the theft of the rifle, drugs, and alcohol. Mark asked that if anyone knew anything to please let him know. Everyone just looked around like they couldn't believe that someone in their midst was a thief. When Mark was about to dismiss the assembly, someone raised their hand in the back. Yes, Mark asked as he pointed at the upstretched arm. I heard that Craig Banks is being kicked out. Who made that decision? It seemed that even the crickets quieted to hear the answer. Mark cleared his throat. Craig has decided to go stay with his sister in Victoria. I'm going to drive him to Gonzales in the morning, and he'll make the rest of the trip on his own. So he's not being banished? Not really. Mark knew he was on slippery ground if he didn't want Joe to find out about Craig and Connie. He and Susan, who is letting him stay with her because of their boys, don't see eye to eye on something important enough that Susan feels he can no longer remain in her home. Craig felt his best option was to go to his sister's. If he had opted to stay here, he would have had to find someone else to take him in. The crowd nodded their heads in unison. Mark knew that they all had varying levels of understanding, but his answer seemed to satisfy them all, at least for now. Mark adjourned the meeting before anyone else could ask another question, and the whole group moved down to Manny's to get their water. They oohed and awed over the new water system like it was magic. The tank didn't have quite enough water in it for everyone, so they went back to the Turner place and used the generator to fill the last few containers and the solar showers. When they were finished, David came up to his dad. "Can I go with you and George in the morning?" David asked. Mark almost instinctively said no, but his brain kicked in a split second before he did. David would probably fall asleep on the trip, and that would give Mark a chance to talk privately with George and still meet Gunny's requirements for having a third gun in the truck. David shot well enough, and Mark figured it was very unlikely that they would run into trouble. "I think we can arrange that. I'll clear it with your mother as long as all of your homework is done." "Thanks, Dad," David smiled. "I'll have my schoolwork done within an hour. Come and tell me when you're finished. I'll wait until then to talk to her. And don't you say a word about this to anyone. If your mom catches wind of this before I talk to her, we'll both be in deep doo-doo." "No problemo," he said over his shoulder as he ran off to finish his work.